Today we're going to be examining some practical advice you can use when running downtime for your tabletop RPG. To do this, we're going to be touching on many of the mistakes game masters often make when running downtime in their games. However, I won't be listing them all off purdy-like as I often do. Instead, let's see how many of the mistakes you can spot. Also, keep track of how you do on the quiz questions, and let us know at the end how you scored. What is downtime? A. Downtime is a period of activity between adventures when the characters are licking their wounds, counting the meager loot they found in the last death trap, and thanking their gods that the game master didn't TPK them for the 5th time. B. Downtime is a period of inactivity between adventures when characters can train, engage in research, perform mundane tasks, pursue personal pursuits, and interact with the world in ways other than adventuring. C. Downtime is a period of inactivity between adventures when the players often groan because they are bored, have to wait forever to do their own downtime because the bard is going from bar to bar, flirting with anything that moves, and wish they had called in sick to the game session. D. All of the above. So I think a strong argument could be made for D, all of the above, but technically the answer is B. Downtime is a period of activity, You know what I just said. Why should you run downtime? A, because it's in the Game Mastery Guide, a plethora of rules exist for it, and it's expected that game masters incorporate downtime into their games. B, because downtime serves as a great time filler that buys the game master time while they prepare the next adventure for the characters to go on. C, because players are often interested in other things than just going on adventures, such as pursuing personal goals and interests, and absent downtime, they'll probably never have a chance to do those things. D, both A and C. Okay, now, as a game master who's fairly busy in real life and knows that prep time comes at a premium, I can commiserate with GMs who might want to throw in downtime to pad out their game session. But really, you probably shouldn't do that. Downtime should also serve a purpose in the game, besides just as a filler. On that note, you don't want to just do downtime because there are rules in the book for it. That is a horrible reason to do a thing. Shoot, D&D 5e has chase rules in the Dungeon Master Guide, but I would never recommend those to anyone. I mean, some rules are just best ignored. Not that chase scenes and stuff are bad, but those rules just... The real reason is that players often have cool things in mind that they would like to have their characters accomplish. However, they aren't things that can be done in the course of standard adventuring. For instance, I once had a player who wanted to work toward becoming a lich and also building his own stronghold. Making room in the game for downtime allowed him to pursue those goals, slowly pushing them along in between adventures. If not for downtime, he would have never been able to do those things because he would have always been busy adventuring. And those were two things that he was super excited about. Imagine what a letdown it would have been for him if there was no way to pursue those objectives. Now, yes, those were both long-term goals, and we spoke and agreed that it would take quite some time and effort to achieve, especially the lichdom part. However, the fact that there was a mechanism that allowed him to work toward those goals was huge for him. Of course, you may find that none of your players care about nor enjoy downtime, and they would all be just the happier to do without it and just keep going on adventures. If that's the case, don't be afraid to toss downtime out of your game. My only caution here is that chances are good that at least one player enjoys the idea of pursuing personal goals during downtime, or that other players, even if they don't care about that, like downtime for other reasons. For instance, it can allow them to gather information about their foes, potentially giving them the edge, shop around for a particular magic item they might want, or curry favors with certain factions in the game. My recommendation is to include downtime so that players have the opportunity to use it. And then if you see that no one seems to enjoy it and they really don't want to do it, consider removing it from the game after discussing the idea with your players. When should you run downtime? A, after every adventure. B, when the characters level up. C, whenever it seems most appropriate for the game or storyline. D, whenever the players request some downtime. E, all of the above. F, none of the above. I mean, technically, you can run downtime whenever you want. I've even seen players retreat from a dungeon to take some downtime. Now, yes, there were some severe consequences for doing that because, you know, the baddies left alive in the dungeon were not happy. But my players were allowed to do that, leave and take their downtime. I don't think that there is necessarily a right or wrong time to run downtime. However, I'll tell you how I do it in my games and why. When we run downtime in my games is quite simple. I make it a requirement of leveling up to take downtime. That means characters could technically not take downtime ever, but they'll never be able to level up if they don't. Why do I do it this way? First, I've noticed that there is always at least one player who wants to take downtime, but that there is almost always a reason for the group to not take any downtime. Most of the time it comes down to the urgency of the next adventure. Look, we know the dragon is going to attack that village at any moment. How can we possibly take downtime now? And then after they deal with the dragon, it'll be, look, in the dragon's hoard, we discovered that letter about the Duke's master plan. And if we don't do something now, he might get away with it. How can we possibly take downtime now? You see, many game masters have this ticking clock element in their games that forces a sense of urgency on their players to get on with it. I think it's an excellent game component to use, but the downside is that it compels them to rush from one adventure to the next and never take downtime because it would be too great of a risk. My solution to this conundrum, therefore, has been to require downtime in order to level up. Now they can spend their downtime doing whatever they wish. It doesn't have to be spent training or anything, but they must take downtime to level up. It's as simple as that. In addition to allowing characters to have downtime, this also has the effect of allowing time to pass in the game world. It's probably a meme that characters can go from like level 1 to 20 in 3 days because they piggyback one adventure on another non-stop, and the next thing you know, they're level 20 with practically no in-game time having passed. Forget a moment, forget all about the lack of realism this might represent, because that's not my primary concern here. Instead, as a game master, I need time to pass to a certain extent so that I can progress certain plot threads in the game world as I run my campaign. The reasons for needing to do this are various, and I won't get into them here, but having time pass in a campaign is a super useful tool for game masters. By the way, do you know that I run an RPG book giveaway every single month where you can win an RPG book of your choice? All you need to do is join the DM Lair newsletter, which is completely free, and then use the sign up link in the newsletter. Furthermore, you'll be getting a new free Game Master resource delivered to you every week. And newsletter subscribers have access to our entire back catalog of free Game Master resources. It's a pretty good deal because it's completely free. Just click that link down below and get yourself hooked up. How long should downtime last? A, precisely 1 week, no more, no less. B, at least a few months so characters can accomplish something meaningful. C, however long it needs to, depending on the activities the characters are performing. D, any of the above are fine. That's right. The exact length of downtime doesn't really matter and will depend on your game and your players. However, I'll tell you how I do it in my games. I have downtime last a minimum of 1 week because that's the amount of time generally required to do something meaningful with a downtime activity. And it also gives me 1 week of in-game time passing that allows me to progress the campaign events in a meaningful way. Generally speaking, 1 week is usually good enough. Now I leave the option open for my players to take longer if they wish, but to date, I have never had a group do that. Sure, they've talked about it, but they've always ended up talking themselves out of it too. I think a pitfall is having there be a fixed amount of time and being completely inflexible about it. Pick a length of time that generally works and then be open to players taking longer if desired. And if the entire group agrees upon it. I mean, if the wizard wants to spend 3 months to work on their stronghold, but the rest of the group wants to get onto the adventure, I would move on to the adventure. However, there's nothing to say that the wizard's player might not have their wizard sit the adventure out while they work on their stronghold, and then they have a different character they roll up go on the adventure at hand. Otherwise, the player would effectively not be playing during several game sessions. Now, there are ways that having downtime last too long can be problematic. Let's say that the wizard does take 3 months working on their stronghold, and the rest of the group takes downtime too. Well, now you have 3 months of downtime to work through and adjudicate. And guess how long that might take at the game session? The entire session? Several sessions? Which leads us to our next question. How long should downtime take during a game session? A, keep it as short as possible. A half hour is great. B, as long as needed to adjudicate everyone's downtime. C, no time at all. Run downtime offline between game sessions. D, both A and C. Now, if you watched my video on pacing, you'll know that to maintain good pacing in your tabletop RPG, you need to move quickly to the next meaningful choice and not dilly-dally with the non-interesting parts of the game. Well, it just so happens that downtime tends to be low on drama or action, and when compared with other parts of the game, such as adventuring, is much less interesting for most players. There are exceptions, of course, such as my one player who mostly just cared about becoming a lich and constructing his stronghold. I'm pretty sure that he probably could have not done without like all the rest of the game and just like become a lich, do my stronghold, that's all I care about, which is fair. I mean, everybody's motivated by different things. But anyway, I've found that most players don't find downtime to be the most interesting part of the game, not by a long shot. Therefore, it is my goal to work through downtime activities as quickly as possible in my games. If I can keep them to a half an hour, that is perfect. An even better solution, if you have the time for it, is to resolve downtime activities with players away from the table in between game sessions. I call that offline, by the way, even though you're probably going to be doing it online via Discord or email. I personally don't have time to resolve downtime outside of game sessions, so for my groups, we do it at the table. Furthermore, what usually happens during downtime is that while you are working with one player to adjudicate their downtime, the rest of the players are mostly just sitting there waiting. It's like rounds in combat. One person is playing the game, everyone else is just waiting for them to take their turn. Sure, they might be thinking about what they're gonna do on their turn, but they're still mostly just waiting. Only downtime often takes longer than a turn in combat, so the problem is amplified. This is another reason why I couple downtime with leveling up. While I am adjudicating downtime with one player, the other players are working on leveling up their characters. This gives them something important and interesting to do. I mean, who doesn't love the process of leveling up and getting cool new abilities and spells? I mean, unless you're in like D&D 5th edition, it's a dead level where you don't get anything and you're just like, oh wow, I don't get anything this level. That sucks, because that does happen sometimes. Anyway, while I'm working with the one player on their downtime, the other players are leveling up and they have something to do. Now, we still try to keep the entire downtime and leveling up process to a half an hour if possible. Doesn't always happen, but it's my goal. Here are some quick tips that will help you speed up downtime at your table. Have a standard price or list of prices, difficulties, and possible results for each downtime activity. Or even better, come up with a downtime rules template that can be applied to almost any downtime activity. More on that later. Make sure the downtime rules you use are available to the players to speed up the process. Like, they need to be able to reference them, it makes things go faster. Limit the number of downtime activities that any one character can do during a downtime period, often identified as game weeks or work weeks. More on that later too. Put a time limit on each player's table time for executing downtime activities. My goal is usually 5 minutes per player, though exceptions happen. By the way, if you're finding this information useful, please give me a thumbs up and share this video with others. One of the best ways you can help other game masters is by sharing helpful content. Which form of pacing should you use for downtime? A, now time. B, slow time, C, abstract or fast time, D, sharp cut. Now, if you haven't watched my video on pacing, you may not be familiar with these, but don't worry, you can check that out later. For now, I'll just tell you that abstract or fast time is the form of time management that you should use for downtime. Abstract time is when players get something done faster in real time than it actually takes in game time. So after a player explains what they would like to accomplish, the game master should adjudicate, announce the results, probably after some dice rolls by the player and the game master, and then the player's downtime is done. Usually this can be wrapped up in about 5 minutes, even though the downtime activity probably took the character a week. That's why we call it abstract or fast time. Using this method of pacing allows us to keep the amount of time spent on downtime at the game table to a minimum. However, a pitfall I have seen groups run into is running downtime in now time, which means events at the game table progress at the same speed as events in the game. In other words, you're role-playing out all of the details of downtime. Can you imagine taking a week of in-game time to represent the week of a week of real time to represent a week of in-game time? That's crazy. Probably not that exaggerated, but let's go back to our example of the wizard in his stronghold. Let's say for the week's downtime, he wants to furnish the entry hall of his secret base. So we then roleplay in real time his going shopping for furniture, talking to the stonemason who's gonna craft the table, and spending time in town hiring some other crafters. If we roleplay that all out, that could easily take us a half hour or more just for that one player's downtime. And then we end up spending the whole game session on downtime, which again, is arguably one of the least interesting parts of the game for most players. Now, from time to time, I do actually run downtime in now time, and we roleplay it all out. However, I save it for special occasions or just for a change of pace. I might also use fast time for 5 players downtime, but use now time for just 1 player because what they're doing is more interesting for one reason or another. However, these are rare exceptions. Most of the time, I use abstract time for downtime. Hey, this is like a drinking game. Take a shot every time I say time in this video. Somebody let me know down in the comments, how many times have I said time in this video? Wow. I guess downtime counts as 1 because it's got time in the word, you know? How much should characters be able to do during downtime? A, as much as they can accomplish during the week or however long downtime lasts. B, just 1 activity. C, 1 activity for every bottle of the GM's favorite beverage they contribute to the war chest. Bringing pizza to the game session serves as a 5x multiplier. D, none of the above. Now, as much as I really want to say that the answer is C, in the futile hope that my players will bring me beer and pizza, it technically isn't. My strong recommendation is that you limit a character to 1 activity during their downtime. This will serve to keep the length downtime takes to resolve at the game table to a minimum. Now, it's gonna be hard to stick to this rule at times because you will 100% have players say things like, come on, buying a magic item shouldn't take me 1 week. I also want to do this and that. Players will sometimes try to stuff as many activities into downtime as they can because it benefits them to do so. Now, sometimes they are right. Sometimes something shouldn't take that long. And other times they're conveniently overlooking the complexity of things like finding a buyer for a magic item, someone who both wants the magic item and has the money for it. Either way, I tell my players that it doesn't matter. We keep downtime to just 1 activity as a game mechanic, whether it's realistic or not. Game mechanics in RPGs, by and large, exist to facilitate gameplay while preserving a semblance of realism. If we push things too far toward realism, we sacrifice facilitation and end up with nearly unplayable games. Now, if your players decide to take a longer downtime period, say 3 months, you might be tempted to allow them to do multiple things. But then we're back to downtime lasting the entire game session or longer. I mean, I don't think that there is a correct answer here. Use your best judgment. I also think it's not a meaningful discussion for us to have here anyway, because in practice, players almost never want to take longer than the bare minimum time for downtime. And if you allow them, they'll probably never take downtime. So the idea of taking a long, crazy long period of time for downtime is probably never going to come up in the game anyway. How should you run downtime? A, use the downtime rules for your game system, duh. B, make up your own downtime rules. C, rules! Who needs rules? Just make them up as you go. D, all of the above. In a general sense, most downtime activities follow a similar pattern. A character decides what they're going to do, the game master determines if there is a cost involved and which dice rolls need to be made, the player spends resources as needed and makes the dice rolls, and finally the game master narrates the results. So it might be tempting to just freeform downtime and make things up as you go, but I think that is a mistake. This would be akin to not having any rules for combat and just narrating things however you feel. That said, there are probably some systems that have almost no rules for anything, and freeforming is exactly what they would recommend. However, if we look at the big players on the field, D&D, Pathfinder, and the like, they have rules that govern most major game elements. The benefit of having codified rules that the game master and the players follow is twofold. First, it sets expectations for players. They know how things work and can expect certain actions to yield certain results. This helps them make informed decisions. Second, for game masters, rules help you adjudicate the output based on the input. In other words, you don't have to pull stuff out of your butt or just sit there and wonder how in the world something should work while everyone waits. You just follow the rules for downtime. So, starting with the downtime rules for your given game system is an excellent place to start. And for new game masters, I definitely recommend that. However, that approach is fraught with peril, as you'll probably learn after using the downtime rules for a while. First, you'll find that following the rules will take some time, as you're likely not super familiar with them, since you don't need to use them that frequently. So you'll need to read them during the game session to figure out exactly how they work before you can adjudicate downtime activities. Now, yes, you can brush up on the downtime rules before a game session when you know there will be downtime, and I do recommend doing that. But then, of course, that adds to your preparation time, increasing the burden on the game master. Next, what you're likely to find is that many official downtime rules follow a similar pattern. Declare an action, spend some money, spend more money if you want to gain a bonus to your rolls, make one or more dice rolls, learn what the result is. So if most of them do follow the same pattern, that brings us to my next point. Homebrew your own simplified set of rules for adjudicating downtime that can be applied to most downtime activities. If we could still have rules, but make them simpler and more versatile, that gives us a multitude of benefits. For D&D 5th edition, I've simplified most of the downtime activities to follow this pattern. The characters will need to make 3 checks, the difficulty class of which the game master determines. The GM decides what 2 of the checks will be, such as athletics and history, and the player can pick the 3rd one as long as it makes sense. The more checks they succeed on, the better the results. There is also a base gold piece cost, usually 100 gold pieces. The character must pay, but they can also pay extra gold in 100 gold piece increments, with each additional 100 gold pieces granting a +1 bonus to any one of the 3 checks. They can get up to a +5 bonus. Now, sometimes paying gold doesn't make any sense, in which case that mechanic would be dropped, and the character just makes 3 checks. Using this general downtime template allows me to quickly adjudicate downtime without having to look things up in the book. It doesn't work for every type of downtime, but it covers quite a bit of situations. Bear in mind too that the cost of a downtime activity should be comparable to the value of the results that will be gained. For instance, research for finding simple information in a library may only cost 100 to 600 gold pieces, following my rule above, but finding and buying a powerful magic item will probably be much more expensive. Also, keep the costs and difficulties low enough to be accessible at low levels, but don't feel like you need to scale those costs up at higher levels, especially if the rewards, like salary for performing mundane work, don't improve. Of course, in our magic item example, it might not be accessible at low levels to buy the best magic items that there are. Like, that's going to take a lot of gold, so it doesn't always apply. Furthermore, the cost doesn't have to be money. In the Delta Green RPG, for instance, the downtime cost for preventing sanity loss is damaging your relationships with the people you care about. Let us know how you did on the quiz questions. Did you get all 8 of them correct? Also, did you find all 10 downtime mistakes? If so, prove it. Tell us what they are. Also, don't forget to join the DM Lair newsletter at the link below, get free Game Master resources, and enter for a chance to win an RPG book of your choice. Now, if you'd like to learn how to have perfect pacing in your tabletop RPG, watch this video right here. And until next time, happy game mastering.